Welcome back, all you awakened savages. And today we're going to discuss a choice every man has to make when he hits midlife. See, this choice, it starts small, like an uneasiness you just can't explain. Right, you look in the mirror, something's off. Right, the man looking back at you, he feels like a stranger. And see this moment, most men try and ignore this. They push it down, distract themselves, buying some shiny car, finding a new thrill, right? And that's when it begins, the midlife crisis. But some men, they do something different, right? They hear this quiet knock and they answer it, right? They strip away what's false. They rebuild their life around truth, strength, purpose. Now that's a midlife awakening. On the surface, they can look the same. A big change, a shake-up, a shift in direction. But underneath, they couldn't be more different. Right? One path will burn your life to the ground for nothing. Right? The other will help you build you into the man you were meant to become. And here's the reality, brother. The man you will be 10 years from now will be decided by what you do in this season of your life. That's why this conversation is so important, and that's why we're going to go there today, right? And let's strip away the emotion for a second and just look at the reality. Midlife isn't random. It's not weakness, right? It's not just a cliche you see in the movies, right? Biologically, this is one of the most significant transitions a man goes through since his adolescence, right? Your testosterone levels aren't what they were when you were 25. Right, that doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means that your body is recalibrating. Right, your hormone profile shifts. Recovery takes longer. Your dopamine sensitivity changes, meaning that the old thrills don't get you excited the way that they used to. Right, your brain is changing also. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself. That naturally slows down unless you actively challenge it. That's why comfort feels so tempting and why so many men stop taking risks, right? Maybe socially, the ground is shifting. Your kids are getting older, right? They don't need you in the same way that they once did. Maybe your career is plateaued, right? You reached the goals that you set in your 20s, but now what? Right? Your parents are getting older. The circle of men around you is getting smaller, right? The noise of your youth is just disappearing. And that silence gets you asking some questions, right? And if you look at the spiritual side of it, now, I don't mean religion here. I mean the deep sense of purpose. This is a season where that little knock gets louder and louder, right? The voice that asks, is this it? Starts showing up more and more. And if you ignore it, that will turn into frustration, boredom, even resentment. But see if you answer it. It can lead you to the most fulfilling chapter in your life, right? Every culture that lasted more than a few generations understood this, right? The Spartans, the samurais, the native tribes. Men were expected to face a new trial at this stage of their life, right? A rite of passage for the second half, right? The first half of life is about building status, skills, wealth, family, right? The second half is about meaning, right? Legacy, service, mastery. And right now, brother, you're standing at that threshold. You can treat it like a wall or you can treat it like a doorway. But the choice you make here will last for decades and decades. Okay, so let's look at these two paths, right? Let's look at path number one, the midlife crisis. Right? A midlife crisis is a fear-driven reaction to the changes that I've just spoke about. Right? The biological shifts, the social shifts, the spiritual questions. Instead of facing them head on, a man tries to outrun them. Right? The samurai called this the grasping spirit, the man who cannot let go of who he was. So he clings harder to the fading, edges of his youth. This is not about age itself, but about energy and refusing to evolve. Right? Now the trigger, right? You might feel something slipping, right? Your youth, your strength, relevance, excitement, right? And that might scare the shit out of you. It did for me. So you might be scrambling to get it back. But the problem here is Most men go reaching for the quick fixes, right? The quick hits instead of trying to build a solid foundation. And this is what it normally looks like. Escapism, new relationship, affair, or chasing women to just still prove that you've got it, that you're desirable, right? Impulse spending, sports car, toys, financial risk without any real plan, right? Quitting without direction, right? Leaving your job, your career in just this blaze of glory, but you've got no mission to step into, right? Addiction cycles, drinking more, right? Losing yourself in porn, gambling, gaming, status chasing, right? Disconnection, pulling away from family, friends, because facing them feels like facing the truth. Right, just for example, right, a man feels disconnected from his purpose. Right, so instead of asking the hard questions, right, he distracts himself with this expensive car and weekend benders. Now, 6 months later, he's back in the exact same spot. Only now he's got more debt, he's broken the trust, right, and he's worse off than he was. Right, so here's the thing. See, on the surface, it might feel good at first. The dopamine spikes, right? The novelty gives them a rush. But see, underneath, right, you are bleeding masculine power. Right, and if we look at the science of avoidance, right, see the amygdala. That's a part of your brain that reacts to fear. This is firing like crazy. Right, so instead of using the prefrontal cortex to slow down and make deliberate choices, you're operating on fight or flight mode. Right, your reticular activating system is scanning for quick rewards, not long-term meaning. Right, it's survival wiring, and it's not built for this second half of your life. Right, and let's look at the cost. Well, you won't usually see the cost until years later. Right, the trust that you broke in your marriage, the connection you lost with your children, right, the debt that you've racked up, right, the years that you can't get back. And then you have to face that man in the mirror when all of this noise dies down. Right, and so why do men choose the crisis path? Okay, the crisis path isn't chosen in one decision, right? One moment. It's chosen in 1,000 small, different surrenders. Right? It's a slow drift into a life of reaction instead of creation. Right? By midlife, see your neurochemistry. It's not on your side. Right? You've got dopamine decline. Right? Because your dopamine receptors are less sensitive. Right? The brain starts looking for bigger and faster hits. New cars, new toys, new women, new thrills. Right? Short-term pleasure becomes the drug of choice because it's the easiest way to feel alive. Right? Then you've got your testosterone drops. Right? Lower testosterone means less natural drive, making it harder to push through that discomfort. Right? So combine that with dopamine chasing and you get a man who avoids hard work and he chases the easy highs. And then we look at the stress chemistry. The more that you chase novelty instead of purpose, the more you spike cortisol, leaving your nervous system in fight or flight. Right? This is where decision making goes to shit. Patience, just disappears. Right? The mind narrows to now, not legacy. Right? And then you fall into this psychological trap. Right? Because when you hit the midlife trigger point, the crisis path often offers immediate escape from the discomfort that you're feeling, right? If you go for that, chasing that younger woman, right? That floods your system with dopamine and oxytocin, right? Because there's new romance. Status, that gives you temporary hits of significance. And then you look at the numbing habits, alcohol, porn, drugs, gambling, right? That sedates, okay? And then it stops you asking deeper questions. And the problem here, if we go back and look at the law of cause and effect, right? The law of cause and effect doesn't care about how good it feels in the moment. Your causes, the daily thoughts, choices, and actions are still shaping your outcomes. Short-term highs equals long-term emptiness. Right? Ancient warriors understood one truth that most modern men forget. Desire without discipline is slavery. Right? They trained themselves to master inner impulses before seeking outer victories. They fasted when food was plenty, practiced restraint when indulgence was available, and faced fear instead of trying to distract themselves. Without this discipline, see the modern man, he slides into the easiest available loop. Trigger, right? Loss, boredom, insecurity, cheap high, novelty, status, sedation, temporary relief, then repeat, right? While your life force, your integrity, and your purpose just quietly erodes. Right? And this is the hard truth of it all. If you do nothing at this midlife fork, you will take the crisis path by default. Not because you're weak, but because the path of least resistance is built into your biology and your culture. Crisis isn't just a season. If you feed it long enough, it becomes an identity. And that identity will rob you of the one thing that you're actually craving, which is self-respect. Now, that's why the other path, the awakening, is such a different game. Because it's not about escape, it's about engagement. And it's available to every single man willing to face what is real. But the awakened path, it must be consciously chosen and daily practiced, right? Through discipline, environmental design, and the commitment to playing the long game over short-term pleasure. Right? So let's walk into the midlife awakening, right? This is the one fewer men take, but every single man has access to. Right? A midlife awakening is a choice. It's the decision to stop running from the discomfort and start listening to it. It's when you stop asking, how do I get back who I was? And you start asking, who am I meant to become next? Now, the emotional driver here is not fear. It's curiosity. It's the willingness to go deeper, to challenge yourself again, and to align your life with what actually matters to you right now, not 15, 20 years ago. Right? And this is what it looks like. You align the inner and the outer. Right? So you ensure your actions, your values, and your environment reflect the man that you want to be right now, not the boy that you once were. Right? It's reflection before action. Instead of blowing things up, slow down, take inventory of what's real. Right? Start building, not escaping. You put energy into your health, your marriage, your craft, your leadership, your family. Legacy thinking. Decisions aren't about what's today's thrill. They're about, what your kids, your community, your future self will thank you for. Every decision is made with the question, will this matter in 10 years? And we switch to a service mindset, shifting from what can I get to what can I give? Right? And then reconnection with family, with old friends, with your own values. Right? And if we look at the science of growth, right? When you choose awakening, you're using your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain built for long-term strategy and complex problem solving. Right? Neuroplasticity, yes, it might naturally slow down at this stage, but see deliberate challenge, learning new skills, pushing your body, expanding your social and creative world, that keeps it alive. Right? Dopamine comes from progress, not novelty, and that's a kind of reward system that actually will last. Right? And every enduring warrior culture had a second stage initiation for men. Right? The samurai called this kyakuku, right? The radical self-reformation. Right? The Stoics saw life as two mountains, the first for achievement, the second for meaning. Right? Indigenous tribes sent men into vision quests to return with wisdom for the community. And the awakening is exactly that. It's not a retreat from life, but a return to it. It's not a downgrade, but it's an upgrade to a more dangerous and capable version of yourself. And I mean dangerous in the best possible way, and not dangerous to others, but dangerous to the part of you that would rather have you settle, hide, or shrink. And this isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more you than you've ever been. Right? Both paths start with discomfort, but one numbs it and the other listens to it. One burns down your life without a plan. The other one rebuilds it with intention. Right? And the awakening path is not the easy road. Right? It's the road that makes you unbreakable. It starts with a decision, not I hope life gets better, but I will use this moment to create a higher version of myself. And this trigger can be your greatest gift. So see that midlife trigger, right? The loss, the plateau, the moment that you realize that the clock is ticking. That isn't here to destroy you. It's here to strip you of the false layers and force you to ask, what would my life look like if I stopped running from the truth and started building from it? right? Biology says your dopamine is low, fine, right? Neuroplasticity says your brain can still rewire until your last breath, right? This is where you stop chasing intensity and start cultivating depth, right? And if you look at the ancient cultures that created men at this crossroad, right? From the Lakato to the samurai to the Spartans, midlife was not decline. It was the threshold into elderhood, a phase marked by mastery, service, legacy. Right? The tribe would pull a man from the centre of his life and send him to a test of skill to prove his body still serves his mind. A solitude quest to strip away distraction and hear his own voice again. Service to the young to transfer wisdom and secure the tribe's future. Right? The message was clear. You're no longer here to prove yourself. You're here to prepare others and to build something that outlives you. And this is the law of correspondence in action. Your outer life will always mirror your inner world. If you meet this trigger with fear and cling to it, your outer reality will shrink and erode. If you meet it with vision and discipline, your external life will expand to match the man that you're here to become. Right? And the awakening path is the discipline of alignment. Inner clarity equals outer direction. Inner strength equals outer stability. Inner purpose equals outer legacy. The awakening path doesn't just give you a second chance at life. It makes you the kind of man that other men notice in the room. Not because you talk about who you were, but because you radiate who you're becoming. Right? So you are at this fork in the road, right? And no man wakes up one morning and looks in the mirror and says, today I'm going to start my midlife crisis. No, it doesn't work like that, right? The crisis or the awakening begins quietly. It's like a hairline crack in the foundations. You don't notice it until the walls start to shift. So I'm going to read out two lists here, right? And as you listen, just keep a tally in your head. You don't have to write it down. You don't have to tell anyone, but just be brutally honest with yourself, right? So let's look at some of the crisis signs, right? You've made impulsive decisions lately that you just can't explain, right? You're chasing things that made sense at 25, but they feel empty now, right? You compare yourself to younger men and you come up short. Right? You're restless, right? Nothing feels enough, right? And you just can't stay in the moment, right? You've been pulling away from your partner, your children, your closest friends, right? These are just some of the signs that I experienced, okay? And I went through this about 7 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, right? And let's look at some of the awakening signs, right? You've started questioning if your goals still matter. Right? You're craving deeper connection with people and with a purpose, something bigger than yourself. Right? You want to build something that will last beyond you. Right? You've been making space for reflection, even when it's uncomfortable. Right? You're willing to learn more, to learn again. You're willing to become a student in a new chapter of your life. And you feel this calling that you're here for more. There's something that you're here to create. And maybe you don't know what that is, but you have this sense within, right? So now I've went through them, what list has more checks, right? If the crisis signs outnumber the awakening signs, it doesn't mean that you're doomed, right? It just means that you're aware now and you're at this turning point. This is the fork in the road moment, right? And it's here right now. So here's the question. If nothing changes in the next 12 months, right? Where will this road take you? And more importantly, do you want to end up there? And only you can answer this. So now let's talk about what's happening inside your brain and your body that makes one path harder to stay on than the other, and how to flip that advantage in your favour. Because once you understand the mechanics, you can stop fighting yourself and start using them, right? Here's the big difference between crisis and awakening. Crisis is driven by the brain's reactive system. Awakening is driven by the brain's creative system. When you're in crisis mode, the amygdala is running the show, right? That's a part of your brain wired for survival, fight, flight, freeze, right? It's great if you're in a burning building, but it's terrible if you're trying to lead a family or shape the next chapter of your life. Now, the amygdala wants safety and quick hits of dopamine, right? The thrill of novelty, the illusion of control. But awakening, on the other hand, that comes from the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles long-term thinking, strategy, complex decision making, right? This is where discipline lives. This is where your vision comes from. Right, but here's the catch. By default, your brain will choose the amygdala's path unless you train it otherwise. That's why midlife can feel like a constant tug of war. One part of you wants to burn everything down, the other part of you wants to build something meaningful. Right, biologically, you're also dealing with the hormonal shifts, lower testosterone, changes in cortisol patterns, the altered dopamine sensitivity. If you don't actively maintain your physical health, these shifts will pull you towards the path of least resistance. Right? That's one reason so many men slide into comfort seeking without even realizing it. Right? Your environment plays a massive role, right? If the men around you are numbing themselves, chasing status, or avoiding the hard truths, then so will you. Right? Because the brain mirrors the tribe it's in. Right? And the ancients knew this. Right? The Stoics warned against being ruled by passions. And that was their word for impulses and reactive emotions, right? The samurais practiced katsu jinkin, right? The life-giving sword, training their mind and their body daily so that they could meet any challenge with clarity instead of panic. Indigenous rites of passage intentionally put men under stress to rewire their nervous system for purpose over impulse. Right, the shift from crisis to awakening happens when you deliberately regain control of your nervous system so fear and impulse don't dictate your actions. Right, rebuild your physical foundation so that your body supports your mind instead of dragging it down. Right, restructure your environment so the men and the inputs around you are pulling you towards legacy and not distraction. Right, so the mechanics are simple, right? The crisis equals a reactive brain plus a weakened body plus a low legacy environment. The awakening equals creative brain plus strong body plus legacy driven environment, right? And you might be asking, well, how can I do that? Well, let's look at a step-by-step framework so that you can make that shift, so that you're not just understanding it, you're truly living it, right? Because understanding the difference between a crisis and an awakening is one thing. Living it is a completely different thing, right? And this is the framework I've seen pull men out of a crisis, right? Out of the spiral where they're going down and put them on the path to awakening, to a life that they could only have dreamed of. And it works, I promise you, if you commit to it. Okay? So step number one, right? This is a complete pause, right? Pause the chaos. So if you're already in this storm, right, the first rule is to stop adding to it. So put a 90-day freeze on any major life decisions. No quitting jobs, no ending marriages, no buying things to fill the gap. Give yourself the gift of clarity before any more actions. Okay? Step number two, audit your honor code, right? Sit down with a pen and write what actually matters to you now, not what mattered at 25. What values will you not compromise? What kind of man do you want your kids to see when they think of you? Right? This is your personal honor code. Every decision that you make should run through it. Okay? Step number three, reclaim your body. Now, I'm not talking about trying to look like a 25-year-old athlete. I'm talking about becoming a savage, right? Strong, mobile, disciplined. Train your body to handle life. Eat like your future depends on it. Because I'm telling you, brother, it does. Right? See, a strong body that sharpens your mind and stabilizes your emotions. It's so important that you get that right. Step number four, choose one worthy battle. Choose a true end result. You need something to pour yourself into, a project, a mission, a skill, right? Something that matters beyond your ego. Building something for your family, mentoring someone, start that business that you've been talking about for the last 10 years. Do something that is worthy, something that's bigger than you, a true end result, your vision. Step number five, upgrade your circle, right? If the men around you are numbing themselves, you will be pulled into the same pattern. Find men who challenge you, who are building, who live by a code. Right? Brotherhood will either drag you down or pull you forward, but it's up to you to choose, so please choose wisely. Step number 6, anchor yourself in service. Make sure your mission benefits more than just you. When your work, your training, and your choices serve your family, your community, more people than you, you'll find a drive that comfort could never ever touch. I promise you this because I know this from example. There's not a better feeling in helping other people. And I've learned this, over a long period in my life where I lived as a selfish person. I cared about myself and it was always me, me, me. But when I started focusing on others, I've experienced a level of peace, joy, just I can't describe it, but it's amazing when you are of service to other people. This is why I do what I do now. Okay, and step number 7, build rituals, not resolutions. Change doesn't stick because of hype, it sticks because of rhythm, right? Morning movement, daily reflection, weekly check-ins, strengthening that body. Habits that keep you aligned without having to think about it. Right, so this is the blueprint. It's quite simple. Stop the chaos, rewrite your code, strengthen your body, fight a worthy battle, surround yourself with builders, serve beyond yourself, live by rituals. You follow this, and you will look back in a year and you will be unrecognizable. Not because you've lost yourself, but because you finally became the man you were supposed to become. Right? In fact, let me give you a real life example, right? A few years ago, someone who I now call a brother, right? And let's call him Mark for the purpose of this video. Right? Mark had basically, it looked from the outside, he had a dream life, right? He had a great job. He owned his house outright, okay? He had a beautiful family. And, it looked like everything was going great. But when he hit this period, he was 42 at the time, I think, he started to, feel different, right? He said that he was feeling invisible at work. His kids were getting a little bit older, so they were spending more time with their friends than they were at home. And he had a good marriage, but the spark just wasn't quite the same. Okay. And one night, after he had a couple of drinks, he was in his garage and he had his phone out and he almost sent a message to an old flame from, I think it was like 20 years ago. And that moment could have been the first domino in a chain that destroyed everything that he built. And here's the thing. He was not a bad man. He was actually an amazing guy, right? But it was because he was unanchored, right? That discomfort of midlife had him looking for something that made him feel alive again, right? But without realizing he was about to set fire to the very ground that could grow him something magnificent. And this is where it changed because instead of hitting send, he called me. Well, he texted me first and then we jumped on a call, right? Because he knew that I wouldn't blow smoke up his ass. He knew I would call him on his bullshit, right? And deep down, he didn't want to text that, woman. It was just because that's how he was feeling. So we spoke for about an hour, right? And that conversation didn't just talk him out of a bad decision, right? But it pointed him to something bigger. Right, and see, over the next year, we worked closely together. He changed so many different things. He changed his routines. He stopped drinking. He started hitting the gym again. Right, he took on a side project where he was mentoring younger guys at his work, giving them the skills that he learned over the 20 plus years in the business. Right, he stopped watching porn. Right, and that alone helped him rebuild the connection and the intimacy with his wife. Right, and he wasn't chasing some old spark, but he was building a new spark, new romance, right? Truly, understanding his wife and what made her tick and what made her happy. Right? The urge for the crisis with him didn't vanish overnight. But see, every choice he made towards the awakening path, it made the crisis path feel less tempting. And this is the thing. This is what I want you to get from this. The gap between crisis and awakening can be one decision, and you don't need to wait until you're staring at that fork to choose the better road. That can be done right now. Because here's the reality, brother. Midlife is not the end of your story. And see, for me, midlife is the beginning of my story, my life. Right? I spent most of my life up until I was 40 in a haze of addiction, madness, chaos, drama. And when I went through my midlife, it started a crisis, but it became my awakening. because I didn't want to live the way I was living anymore. So you've now got about another 40 years on this earth, maybe give or take 10 years, right? So you can either just, put yourself in an early grave or a life full of regrets, or you can create something magical, expand, right? Become the man that your kids truly admire, not the man that they pity, right? No one's going to hand you this on a plate. This awakening path is not something that you stumble into, something you choose every single day in your habits, your conversation, and the way you show up when no one's watching. If you think it's too late, no, brother, you're bang on time. Just remember that the men who built legacies worth remembering, Marcus Aurelius, Miyamoto Mushimi, Mandela, the list could go on. They didn't stop at midlife. They sharpened, they deepened, they played the long game. Right? The second half of your life is a second chance at life. This is your chance to create your masterpiece, right? Or go into a slow collapse. The only difference between the two is the man who's steering the ship, and that man is you. So I will ask you this straight. When your time is up, do you want to be remembered as the man who lost himself or the man who became himself? That's the choice in front of you right now. So make it count. Okay, and I've got one last thing for you, a field mission. So in the next 24 hours, I want you to take 30 minutes, no phones, no TV, no noise, and just write down 2 lists. List number 1, every crisis, habit, or temptation you've been feeling lately. This could be reaching for alcohol at the end of a stressful day, scrolling through Instagram, comparing yourself to younger guys, daydreaming about blowing up your life instead of fixing it, right? Fantasizing about an old flame, spending money when you don't really have it, on toys or status symbols, right? Pulling away from your wife or your kids because you feel restless or trapped, right? Be brutally honest. Don't dress it up, right? If it's there, write it down, right? And then list number 2, every awakening action you could take instead. So choosing training or movement instead of alcohol, journaling about what you actually want instead of scrolling, having an honest conversation with your partner instead of checking out, right? Committing to a purpose or a project, building something that outlives you, spending a full day with your kids, fully present with no phone, no distractions, right? Calling a brother who will challenge you instead of trying to numb out, right? Don't just think it, write it. Get it out of your head and onto paper where you cannot hide from it. Then circle one awakening action you can take that day, today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Right? The difference between talking about change and living it is the first move. Make yours before the day ends. Right? And listen, now, if you're standing at this fork in the road, right, you've got 2 choices. It can be a crisis or an awakening. No one's going to choose for you, right? And if this hit, drop awakening in the comments so I know that you're one of the men willing to take the harder path. Share this with a brother who's drifting into the crisis and doesn't even see it. Right? And if you want more tactical tools for walking this awakening path, then hit subscribe and notification. Right? You're not alone in this fight, brother. We're building the next chapter together. And as always, I truly appreciate every single one of you from the bottom of my heart. I love you guys. I'll catch you on the next one. I've got a video here and you can subscribe here. Take care.